Let's evaluate the lay the point ladder strategy. This is interesting because we have very high win rates. Actually, 3 out of every 4 sessions won money. But there is some real risk to this strategy, so make sure you stay tuned. This version is based on Wayland's video titled The Unbeatable Lay the Point Ladder System, but I did make a few changes that I'll describe later. This was submitted to me by Maverick on dicedata.info, but the thing is, he did want to see this run at a lower level, and I'm going to do that in my next video. So make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss it. I ran the simulation for 100,000 sessions of 10 shooters per session, but I did add some stopping conditions that I'll get into later. Table minimum is $25, but we're only making $100 bets in this strategy, so I actually probably should have put 100 there. The maximum is $1,000 today, and we will be hitting it in this simulation. The strategy is actually very simple, and I'll demonstrate it with a few rolls from one of the sessions. The first thing we do is wait for a point to be established, and then we're going to lay $100 on that point. Now, this is going to win on a 7 out, and it's going to lose whenever the shooter makes the point. When it wins, you can see that it's going to be paid $63. This is dependent on the actual number, so you can see that over on the right hand side. When it loses, we're going to go up one level, so that'll go to $200 on the next point. And when it wins, we'll come back down. And that's essentially the strategy. Okay, we have a point of 8 this time, and we're going to lay that for $200. That's going to win $157 on a 7 out. And we lost it again, so this time we are going to $300 in the ladder. And the point's going to be a 6. $300 lay on the 6 is going to win $238. And there's our 7 out, so that's our first hit. We're down only $62 now. New shooter sets the point of 9, so this time we're going to step down to $200. There we won $125. New shooters coming out looking for a point. That point is going to be 9 again. And our ladder is down to $100 now, which we're going to lose right away. Shooter is now looking for their second point. That point is going to be a 6. We ladder back up to $200, which we're going to win. Now we're going down to $100. Now this is a little bit different than what Wayland was doing, but this is how I have it programmed. The other nuance that I have programmed into this particular simulation is that if it ladders up to 10 levels, which is $1,000, if that $1,000 is lost, then we're going to stop playing. If it wins, then we're going to ladder back down to $900 and keep playing. There's our 7 out at the $100 level. So we're going to, of course, stay at $100 for the next shooter. Point's going to be 9 again. and that's going to be hit. So let's stop there. Let's go in and start looking at the results of the simulation of 100,000 sessions of the lay the point ladder strategy. First, we'll look at the dice throws and make sure that they're fair. Here in gray is the expected proportion of dice throws. We threw the dice 8.5 million times. In blue is the actual number of dice throws for this particular simulation. You can see them lined up quite well. And here's the actual number of dice throws, both expected and actual for this simulation. Let's see how many times each shooter threw. Now, the median is 6 and the average is 8.5. The middle 50% is between 4 and 11 throws of the dice, and the middle 90% is between 2 and 22. The full range is 2 as the least, that's a point 0.7 out, and the maximum was 103 rolls for a single shooter. Now let's look at the number of dice rolls by session, and this is for a session of 10 shooters, excluding that early stopping condition that I mentioned earlier. The median here is going to be 83, and the average is 85. Notice it's just a little bit lower than our normal average, which is 85.3, and that's because of that early stopping condition. The middle 50% are between 70 and 98 throws the dice, and the middle 90% are between 54 and 123. The maximum we saw was 207, and the minimum was 27. Now, since we're playing a don't strategy, that minimum is actually very good, right? Because you have a lot of 7 outs, and that's what you're looking for. Now let's see how the casino did. The total bet was $385 million, with $147 million won and $156 million lost. That's an overall house take of just almost $8.7 million and a house edge of 2.257%. This is how that house edge compares to some of the other common bets on the craps table. Now let's see how our actual players did. First, we'll look at the data by shooter, and here we have a whopping 73.6% of the players that won money, and only 26.4% lost money on an individual shooter. There were no players that pushed that ended up at the same amount won and lost. Now, notice the number of shooters here. This is 996,716. It's usually a million when I let those players finish out those 10 shooter sessions. But in this case, some of those players actually maxed out at that $1,000 level. So what they did is they dropped out at the next shooter. I was actually quite surprised at this number. I thought that a lot more of them would have hit that $1,000 number, but it's actually only 30 what 300 or so. So it's really not a whole lot of players that were hitting that limit, even though we ran quite a few replications of the simulation. Let's see now how much they actually won or lost. Of course, we're still looking at the information by shooter. We have a very big spike, 58.5% that are right above zero. If you look at the median here, it's actually positive. It's $57. So more than half of all the players are going to actually be winning money. The average is $8.73 lost. And we tend to see that with a lot of these where the median, where we see some skew, right? The median is positive, the average is negative because there are some sessions that tend to lose quite a bit of money. The middle 50% is between a loss of $5 and a win of $76, and the middle 90% is between a loss of $410 to $238. And you can see the limits here. Most lost was a pretty brutal $5,500. Compared to that, a modest win of $713 was the most won for a single shooter. Now let's see how we did over those sessions of up to 10 shooters. 67.1% won some money, and 32.9% lost some money, and very, very few pushes that we had on this simulation. Let's take a look at how much they won or lost. Very interesting shape of this graph. So the highest numbers are above zero, which is quite interesting. The median here, $240. So that's the 50% mark. 50% made more than 240, 50% made less than 240. Average $86.99. Of course, that's going to be negative given that there is a house edge to this particular strategy, just like all strategies in craps. The middle 50% is between $196 and $442 won. And the middle 90% between the 5th and 95th percentiles is $1891 lost and $586 won. The most lost, $7,319. And the most won, $732. Very interesting results I found on this particular strategy. Now, if you're interested in how we got to $7,319 lost or $732 won, I always post the full replays of the best and worst sessions on YouTube and Patreon for my subscribing members. This one is actually super interesting with the most lost because the ladder goes right up to $1,000 and then makes a couple wins and drops down. So it's actually quite dramatic to watch this one play out. Now let's go in and see what the bankrolls look like. This is a chart of the bankrolls at their worst over the session. Again, as expected, we see this kind of long tail. 99th percentile is $5,749. So that's basically, you can interpret that as 99% of the sessions were down less than that amount over those 10 shooters. And on the right-hand side, I talk about getting out of the hand. Only 26.4% actually didn't make it out of the hand. But the most loss, we saw that before, $5,500. The median of the losses when you lose money is $300. The least lost is $100, which makes sense given that we're making $100 bets. And I think that's all I have for you today. As always, thanks for watching and good luck at the tables.